Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Horizon, watching the impossible sight before him. The massive alien ship hung in space like a dark crystal cathedral, its surface shifting between colors that had no names in any human language. 3 weeks ago, Jake had been conducting routine deep space surveys near the edge of the solar system. Now he was about to make history as the first human to speak with beings from another world. The communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Fisher, turned toward Jake with wide eyes. The alien vessel was broadcasting on multiple frequencies using mathematical sequences that could only mean one thing. They wanted to talk. Jake felt his heart racing as he gave the order to open a channel. The main screen flickered and suddenly, filled with a face that would haunt human nightmares for generations to come. The being called itself Ambassador Kethivore, and its appearance defied every science fiction movie humans had ever made. Its skin looked like liquid mercury flowing over bone, and its eyes were pools of starlight that seemed to see directly into Jake's soul. When it spoke, the words came not through sound, but directly into their minds, making several crew members gasp in shock. Dr. Lisa Carter, the mission's xenobiologist, stepped forward despite her obvious fear. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, even though part of her had never truly believed it would happen. The ambassador's mental voice was strangely gentle as it explained that its people were called the Vial-Tharan Confederacy, and they had been watching humanity for decades. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine when Kethivore explained they had not come to welcome humans to the galactic community, but to deliver a warning. Commander Ryan Blake moved his hand closer to the weapons console as the ambassador continued speaking. The Vial-Tharans had detected something about humans that terrified them. According to their sensors, every human aboard the ship registered as what they called void-touched. Blake had no idea what that meant, but the fear in the alien's mental voice made it clear this was not good news. Kethivore explained that in 50,000 years of galactic civilization, the Vial-Tharans had encountered only 7 other void-touched species. 3 had become cosmic guardians who transcended physical existence to protect the universe itself. The other 4 had become something called devourer dynasties that consumed entire star systems before vanishing into the dark between galaxies. The ambassador's next words made Jake's blood freeze in his veins. Humanity's expansion patterns and technological development matched the devourer dynasties exactly. The speed at which humans had gone from primitive agriculture to interstellar travel was unprecedented among galactic civilizations. Most species took millions of years to achieve what humans had accomplished in mere thousands. The Vial-Tharans had come to determine whether humanity would follow the path of the Guardians or the Devourers. Dr. Carter asked the question that everyone was thinking. What exactly did void-touched mean, and why was it so dangerous? Kethivore's explanation made her wish she had never asked. Void-touched species had an innate connection to dark matter and dark energy, the mysterious forces that made up most of the universe. They could manipulate the very fabric of space and time itself, though most never realized they possessed such power. The ambassador activated a scanning device that filled the bridge with an eerie purple light. The readings it displayed made Kethivore step backward in what appeared to be shock. Every human on the ship was emitting dark energy signatures at levels that should have been instantly fatal. They were living conduits for forces that could reshape reality itself, and they had no idea what they were carrying inside them. Jake felt dizzy as the implications hit him. Humanity had been spreading across the solar system building colonies and space stations while unknowingly wielding power that could destroy everything they touched. The ambassador confirmed his worst fears by explaining that void-touched abilities grew stronger with each generation and became more unstable during times of stress or strong emotion. Commander Blake demanded to know why the Vial-Tharans had waited so long to make contact if humanity was so dangerous. The answer chilled everyone on the bridge. They had been hoping humans would develop more slowly, giving the Confederacy time to prepare. but recent events on Earth had accelerated the timeline. Wars and conflicts had caused massive spikes in dark energy readings that were detectable from hundreds of light years away. The meeting ended with Ambassador Kethvor delivering an ultimatum disguised as an offer of cooperation. The Veltharans would work with humanity to understand and control their void-touched nature, but only if humans agreed to strict limitations on their expansion and development. They had exactly 1 year to prove they could be trusted with the power growing inside them. As the alien ship disappeared into the darkness, Jake realized that everything humans thought they knew about their place in the universe had just changed forever. They were not alone, and they were far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The question now was whether humanity would become saviors or destroyers of all life in the galaxy. Engineer Kate Sullivan was 3 miles beneath the surface of Titan when reality stopped making sense. She had been working the night shift in the methane processing facility when the accident happened. Miner Bob Taylor had gotten his arm caught in the extraction machinery, and his screams of pain echoed through the tunnels. Kate rushed to help him, but when she reached for the emergency shutdown, her hand passed right through the solid metal control panel. The mining equipment had become translucent like colored glass, and Kate could see Bob's arm moving freely through what should have been crushing steel. Other miners gathered around, staring in disbelief, as their tools and machinery flickered between solid and ghostly. The phenomenon lasted exactly 17 minutes before everything returned to normal. Bob's arm was completely uninjured, but the psychological impact on the crew would last much longer. Similar incidents were being reported across the solar system. On Mars, scientist Alex Chen was documenting the strangest data of his career. The research station's sleep monitoring equipment had detected impossible energy readings from the dormitories. When people dreamed their bodies were somehow bending space around them, creating pockets of altered gravity and twisted light. Dr. Chen watched security footage of sleeping colonists floating inches above their beds while shadows moved in directions that defied physics. The most disturbing case involved colonist Mary Johnson, who had been experiencing nightmares about her childhood home on Earth. The monitoring equipment showed that during her dreams, her quarters briefly transformed into an exact replica of her old bedroom, complete with furniture and decorations that existed nowhere on Mars. When Mary woke up, she found a flower from her mother's garden lying on her pillow, despite the fact that no Earth plants had ever been brought to the station. Military analyst Colonel Sam Wright was tasked with investigating these reports, and what he discovered in the historical archives made him question everything he thought he knew about human history. Throughout the centuries, there had been countless accounts of miraculous events during humanity's darkest moments. Soldiers walking through enemy fire without being hit, ships surviving storms that should have destroyed them, people finding strength beyond human limits when protecting their loved ones. The Colonel's team found evidence that these miracles followed specific patterns. They always occurred during times of extreme emotional stress, and the witnesses described similar phenomena. Time seeming to slow down, gravity behaving strangely, light bending in impossible ways. What previous generations had attributed to divine intervention or natural anomalies now appeared to be early manifestations of void-touched abilities. Dr. Grace Murphy was among the first human scientists to work directly with the Veltharans at their research station in the asteroid belt. The aliens had established the facility to study humanity's unique connection to dark matter, and what they found was both fascinating and terrifying. Human DNA contained quantum structures that should not exist in normal matter. Every cell in the human body was entangled with dark energy particles in ways that violated known laws of physics. Her research partner, Dr. Ben Torres, made an even more disturbing discovery. The quantum entanglement was growing stronger with each new generation. Children born in space showed dark energy readings 10 times higher than their parents. The Veltharan scientists believed that within a few decades, human children would be born with conscious control over reality-altering abilities. The breakthrough came when Dr. Murphy accidentally triggered her own void-touched abilities during a moment of intense frustration. She had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to understand the quantum structures when her equipment malfunctioned for the 5th time. Her anger caused the laboratory's gravitational field to reverse, briefly sending everything floating toward the ceiling. The Valtharan researchers were both amazed and horrified to witness a human manipulating fundamental forces through pure emotion. Engineer Tony Williams experienced his awakening during a routine spacewalk outside the Europa Research Station. A micrometeorite had damaged his suit's life support system, and he was slowly suffocating in the vacuum of space. As consciousness began to fade, Tony's desperate will to survive somehow created a bubble of breathable atmosphere around him. He floated there for 6 hours, surrounded by impossible air, until the rescue team found him. The rescue footage showed Tony encased in a shimmering field that contained not just oxygen, but the correct pressure and temperature for human survival. The field moved with him and maintained perfect atmospheric conditions, despite being exposed to the vacuum of space. When asked how he had created the field, Tony could only say that he had wanted very badly to keep breathing, and somehow the universe had listened. Teacher Amy Fisher was conducting a science class for the children of New Geneva Colony when the most frightening incident yet occurred. She was explaining basic physics to her students when 8-year-old Carl Davis asked why humans couldn't just make gravity work differently. Before Amy could answer, Carl reached out and touched his desk, causing it to float gently toward the ceiling. The other children laughed and began experimenting with their own furniture until the entire classroom was filled with floating objects. Amy tried to restore order, but her own stress at the situation caused the room's artificial gravity to fluctuate wildly. Children and desks tumbled through the air in slow motion, while the walls began to ripple like water. The incident ended only when Amy forced herself to remain calm, allowing the gravitational fields to stabilize. The children treated it as a wonderful game, but Amy reported nightmares for weeks afterward. Dr. Ben Torres presented his findings to a joint human-Valtharan committee, and his conclusions were grim. Humanity was entering what the aliens called Phase 2 of void-touched evolution much faster than any previous species. Within a generation, humans would develop conscious control over dark matter manipulation. Without proper training and control, these abilities could tear apart the fabric of space-time itself. The Valtharans revealed that they had been monitoring humanity not just to assess the threat, but to learn from human development. Previous void-touched species had taken centuries to reach Phase 2, giving the galaxy time to prepare. Humanity's rapid advancement was unprecedented and potentially catastrophic. They estimated that humans had less than 5 years before the first children would be born with reality-altering powers they could consciously control from birth. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had spent her entire career studying ancient civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for what lay waiting in the ruins of the Nethys Empire. The joint expedition to the dead worlds beyond the galactic rim was humanity's first chance to see what happened when a void-touched species lost control of their power. Elena stood on the observation deck of the UNS Discovery, watching space itself behave in ways that made her question her sanity. The star system they had entered no longer followed normal physics, where planets should have orbited a central star. There were instead floating chunks of crystallized time moving in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Captain Nicole Park guided their ship through regions where light moved backward and gravity flowed like water. The Valtharan archaeologist Morthek served as their guide through this nightmare landscape, explaining that they were seeing the aftermath of reality manipulation gone wrong. Lieutenant Carl Davis commanded the military escort team that would protect the expedition on the surface of what had once been the Nethys homeworld. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere, Carl noticed that his equipment was malfunctioning in subtle ways. Chronometers ran backward. Compasses pointed toward locations that didn't exist. Radio communications carried conversations from people who had died thousands of years ago. The planet itself was trapped in a loop of temporal distortion that made Normal existence impossible. The ruins of Nethys cities stretched across continents of crystallized space-time where buildings existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Elena followed Morthek through structures that were bigger inside than outside, while her recording equipment captured images of architecture that changed based on the observer's angle of view. The Valtheran explained that the Nethys had learned to reshape reality so completely that they had forgotten the difference between what was real and what they wanted to be real. Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's physicist, took readings that defied everything he knew about the universe. Matter density fluctuated wildly from point to point. Energy moved in directions that didn't exist. Temperature readings showed areas where heat flowed from cold objects to hot ones in direct violation of thermodynamics. Webb realized that the Nethys hadn't just broken the laws of physics, they had rewritten them so many times that the fundamental structure of reality had collapsed. The first intact Nethys recording they found was embedded in a crystal formation that existed in 7 dimensions at once. When Elena activated the playback device, the air around them filled with images of beings that looked almost human, except for their eyes, which contained swirling galaxies instead of pupils. The recording showed the final days of Nethys civilization, when their reality manipulation had grown beyond all control. The Nethys had started as explorers and scientists, much like humanity, but their void-touched abilities had corrupted them slowly over millennia. They learned to reshape matter with thought alone and created wonders that dazzled the galaxy, cities that existed in multiple times simultaneously, planets carved into perfect geometric shapes, stars arranged into artistic patterns across space. But with each reality alteration, they lost more of their connection to what was natural and normal. Morthek translated the ancient recordings as they explored deeper into the ruins. The Nethys had discovered that their power was growing beyond their ability to control it. Children were being born who could reshape entire continents with their dreams. Adults were accidentally creating pocket universes when they experienced strong emotions. The very act of existing had become dangerous for them and everything around them. The expedition found evidence of the Nethys Empire's final desperate attempts to control their abilities. They had built massive machines designed to dampen void-touched powers, but the devices only made things worse. The interaction between artificial suppression and natural void-touched energy had created feedback loops that shattered space-time across entire star systems. Captain Park guided the Discovery through what Morthek called a null zone, where the Nethys had tried to completely erase their mistakes from reality. In these regions, matter could not form because the Nethys had deleted the quantum fields that allowed particles to exist. The ship's sensors showed readings of absolute nothingness extending for light years in every direction. Not empty space, but true void where even the concept of existence had been removed. The most disturbing discovery came when they found the Nethys Imperial Archives buried beneath layers of crystallized time. Dr. Webb used specially designed equipment to access data crystals that existed in temporal loops, reading the same information over and over for eternity. The archives contained detailed records of other void-touched species that had faced the same crisis throughout galactic history. Elena translated records of civilizations that had tried every possible solution to the void-touched problem. Some had attempted to suppress their abilities entirely, only to have them explode outward in uncontrolled bursts. Others had embraced their power completely and lost their sanity as reality bent to their every whim. A few had tried to find balance, but had been destroyed by members of their own species who chose differently. The archives revealed the 3 phases of void-touched evolution that the Valtherans had mentioned. Awakening, where abilities first manifested during stress. Mastery, where conscious control developed. And finally, either transcendence, where the species evolved beyond physical existence, or consumption, where they became reality-devouring entities that spread across the galaxy like a plague. Lieutenant Davis discovered weapons caches in the deepest ruins containing devices that the Nethys had created during their final war against themselves. The weapons could unmake matter at the quantum level, leaving behind regions where physics no longer applied. But the most terrifying find was evidence that the Nethys had not died out completely. They had transformed themselves into pure, void-touched energy that existed in the spaces between realities. The expedition's final and most important discovery was a message specifically encoded for humanity. The Nethys had somehow known that another void-touched species would eventually find their ruins and had prepared a warning written in dark matter fluctuations that only human minds could interpret. Dr. Rodriguez felt the message burning itself into her consciousness as she made contact with the encoding crystal. The message was simple, but carried the weight of an entire civilization's regret. The Nethys had tried to become gods and had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. They had gained the power to reshape reality itself, but had lost their humanity in the process. They had become something that was no longer capable of love or compassion or simple joy. They existed now as pure hunger for power that could never be satisfied. As the expedition prepared to leave the dead Nethys worlds, Elena realized that humanity stood at the same crossroads that had destroyed every void-touched species before them. The power growing inside every human was a gift that could elevate them to cosmic guardianship, or a curse that would consume them and everything they touched. The choice would have to be made soon because the transformation was accelerating and there would be no second chances. Dr. Trevor Morgan stood before a gathering of 2,000 humans on the colony world of New Eden and spoke words that would split humanity down the middle. The charismatic scientist had spent months analyzing the data from the Nethys ruins and had reached a conclusion that terrified the Valtheran observers monitoring his speech. Morgan declared that humanity should embrace their void-touched nature completely and claim their rightful place as masters of the galaxy. His followers called themselves Dark Genesis, and they believed that the Nethys had failed not because they were too powerful, but because they had tried to limit themselves. Morgan argued that humanity's rapid development was proof that they were meant to transcend the fears and restrictions that had held back previous void-touched species. The crowd cheered as he demonstrated his own abilities by reshaping the metal podium into flowing sculptures with nothing but concentrated thought. On the other side of the ideological divide, War Chief Zethtal was rallying the Valtheran military for a preemptive strike against Earth. The ancient warrior had studied the records of every devourer dynasty and saw the same patterns emerging in human behavior. Rapid expansion, unchecked ambition, and now open calls for galactic dominance. Zethtal believed that allowing humanity to develop further would doom every other species in the galaxy. Colonist Amy Fisher found herself caught in the middle of these escalating tensions as the situation on New Eden spiraled out of control. The planet had been humanity's most successful colony, with thriving cities and productive farms, but the arrival of Dark Genesis supporters had changed everything. Riots broke out between those who supported Morgan's vision and those who feared where it would lead. Admiral Patricia Stone commanded Earth's newest fleet from the bridge of the UNS Defiance, as she tried to navigate the growing crisis through diplomacy rather than warfare. Stone knew that humanity was not ready for a war against the technologically superior Valtherans, but she also couldn't allow them to attack human colonies. Her aide, Commander Paul Carter, presented intelligence reports that made the situation even more complex than anyone realized. Carter had discovered that some humans were already entering what the Valtherans called Phase 2 of void-touched evolution. These individuals could consciously manipulate reality in ways that went far beyond the emotional outbursts that had characterized Phase 1. Teacher Mary Johnson had been caught on surveillance footage reshaping her classroom to look like different historical periods while she taught lessons about ancient civilizations. Engineer Tony Williams had progressed even further in his abilities after his experience in space. Security cameras showed him walking through solid walls when he was running late for work and creating tools from thin air when his equipment malfunctioned. Most disturbing of all, William seemed completely unaware that he was doing anything unusual. His reality manipulation had become so natural that he no longer noticed when he broke the laws of physics. The crisis reached its peak when Dr. Morgan's followers attempted to accelerate the void-touch development of a group of children who were showing early signs of Phase 2 abilities. The Dark Genesis scientists believed they could create a generation of humans with full, conscious control over reality manipulation from birth. Amy Fisher watched in horror as the experiment began in a converted research facility on New Eden's northern continent. The children, ranging in age from 6 to 12, had been volunteers from families who supported Morgan's vision of human transcendence. The scientists used a combination of meditation techniques, emotional stimulation, and exposure to concentrated dark matter fields to try to trigger advanced void-touched abilities. At first, the results seemed promising as the children began demonstrating impressive reality manipulation skills. 8-year-old Carl Davis could make objects disappear and reappear at will. 10-year-old Lisa Carter created miniature suns that provided light and heat, but somehow didn't burn anything they touched. 12-year-old Bob Taylor learned to slow down time around himself, allowing him to move at incredible speeds relative to everything else. The Dark Genesis scientists celebrated their success, but their joy was short-lived. The children's abilities began growing exponentially beyond any hope of control. Carl's object manipulation started affecting things he wasn't trying to target, making furniture walls, and even people flicker in and out of existence. Lisa's miniature suns began growing larger and hotter, threatening to ignite the facility's atmosphere. Bob's time manipulation created temporal fractures that aged some areas of the building while reversing time in others. Amy Fisher joined the evacuation effort as reality itself began breaking down around the research facility. The children's combined void-touched abilities were interacting with each other in ways that created feedback loops of escalating power. Space twisted into impossible shapes. Gravity flowed like liquid. Light bent into colors that had no names. And temperatures fluctuated between absolute zero and stellar heat. The worst moment came when the reality distortions tore open what the Viltharan scientists later identified as a dimensional rift. Through the tear in spacetime emerged something that should not have existed. The consumed consciousness of the Nethys Empire still existed as pure malevolent hunger in the spaces between realities, and the children's uncontrolled abilities had given it a doorway back into normal space. The Nethys consciousness began feeding on the reality distortions around the facility, growing stronger with each moment. Admiral Stone ordered an immediate evacuation of the entire colony as the alien presence spread outward, consuming matter and energy while leaving behind regions of absolute void. The entity that had once been a civilized species was now nothing but endless appetite for existence itself. Commander Carter coordinated the joint human and Viltharan response to contain the breach before it could spread beyond New Eden. The irony was not lost on anyone that the two sides who had been preparing for war against each other now had to work together to prevent a threat that could destroy them both. Viltharan reality stabilization technology combined with human void-touched abilities to create a containment field around the dimensional rift. The battle to seal the breach took 6 hours and cost the lives of dozens of volunteers from both species. Dr. Morgan himself sacrificed his life, using his void-touched abilities to help collapse the dimensional tear, even though it meant accepting that his vision of human transcendence had been catastrophically wrong. The Nethys consciousness fought desperately to maintain its foothold in reality, but eventually the combined effort forced it back into the void between dimensions. War Chief Zeth Tal and Admiral Stone stood together in the aftermath, watching the quarantine ships maintain their vigil around the sealed breach. The crater where the research facility had stood was now a perfectly spherical hole in reality where nothing could exist. The Valtharan military leader acknowledged that humans had proven they could choose cooperation over domination when the stakes were high enough, but the damage to trust between the species was severe. Hundreds of human colonies now harbored dark Genesis cells that continued to believe in transcendence through power. Several Valtharan worlds still called for preemptive strikes against humanity before more dimensional rifts could be opened. The children who had survived the experiment retained their enhanced abilities, but were traumatized by their role in nearly destroying their own world. Amy Fisher helped establish monitoring stations around New Eden to watch for signs that the dimensional seal might be weakening. The colonists who remained lived with the knowledge that their world sat on top of a gateway to something that wanted nothing more than to devour all of existence. The test had revealed both humanity's potential for transcendence and their capacity for catastrophic destruction, but the final choice between these paths still lay ahead. President Laura Mitchell stood in the most secure conference room on Earth, facing beings that existed as living crystalline structures filled with swirling patterns of pure light. The architects had finally revealed themselves after watching galactic civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, and their presence made the air itself hum with barely contained power. These were the first void-touched species to choose transcendence, and they had come to offer humanity the same choice that had elevated them beyond physical existence. The lead architect spoke through harmonics that bypassed human hearing and resonated directly in the bones of everyone present. It explained that they had been monitoring humanity's development with growing concern as the species approached the same crossroads that had destroyed countless civilizations before them. The choice was simple in concept, but devastating in its implications. Submit to guided evolution under architect supervision or face annihilation before humanity could threaten the stability of the universe itself. Dr. Sandra Lewis listened to the ultimatum while her mind raced through calculations that might offer a third option. The quantum physicist had been studying the fundamental structure of dark matter since the first Valtharan contact, and her research had revealed possibilities that even the ancient architects seemed unaware of. She believed that humanity might be able to forge a completely new path through the void-touched evolution that had never been attempted before. The architect's offer came with terms that would fundamentally change what it meant to be human. Physical bodies would be abandoned in favor of existence as pure consciousness. Individual identity would be merged into a collective awareness that spanned galaxies. Death would become impossible, but so would the simple joys of physical sensation, like tasting food or feeling sunlight on skin. Humanity would gain godlike power but lose their humanity in the process. President Mitchell requested time to consult with her advisors while privately knowing that no human government could make such a decision for the entire species. The choice would have to be made by every individual human simultaneously, or it would tear civilization apart. Even worse, the architects had given them only 72 hours to decide before implementing their final solution to the void-touched problem. Captain Rachel Murphy commanded the deep space research vessel UNS Explorer on a desperate mission to the galactic core, where the strongest concentrations of dark matter offered the best hope of understanding humanity's unique connection to the universe. Her crew included volunteers from both human and Valtharan scientists who were working together, despite the growing tensions between their governments. Dr. Lewis had theorized that dark matter itself might contain information that could reveal new possibilities for void-touched evolution, but accessing that information required technology that pushed both species to their limits. The research team had constructed a quantum resonance chamber that could temporarily merge human consciousness with dark matter flows, allowing direct communication with the fundamental forces of the universe. Engineer Kate Sullivan volunteered for the first attempt at dark matter communion despite the obvious dangers to her sanity and survival. As the resonance chamber activated, Kate felt her consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of her physical brain and merge with currents of dark energy that flowed between galaxies. The experience revealed truths about the universe that no living being was meant to comprehend. Through the dark matter network, Kate perceived the history of every void-touched species that had ever existed. She witnessed civilizations that had chosen transcendence and become part of the cosmic infrastructure that maintained reality's stability. She saw others that had chosen consumption and become cancerous growths that devoured everything they touched until they burned themselves out. But most importantly, she glimpsed the possibility of a fourth path that had never been taken. The revelation came with a price, as Kate's human mind struggled to process information encoded in the quantum structure of space-time itself. When the research team extracted her from the resonance chamber, she was barely conscious and spoke in mathematical equations rather than words. Dr. Lewis worked desperately to translate Kate's discoveries before the engineer's brain completely shut down from the strain of impossible knowledge. Kate's fragmented reports described a theoretical state called the bridge protocol, where void-touched species could become conduits between realities rather than consumers or guardians of them. Instead of abandoning physical existence or devouring it, they could maintain their connection to both normal matter and dark energy, while serving as living links between different dimensional states. The protocol required something that had never been achieved in galactic history. Every member of the species would have to simultaneously choose connection over domination and maintain that choice permanently. A single individual choosing consumption over bridge building would corrupt the entire network and transform the species into another devourer dynasty. President Mitchell received Dr. Lewis's report just as monitoring stations detected massive disturbances at the edge of the galaxy. The readings showed dark matter storms of unprecedented magnitude approaching from the direction of the consumed galaxies beyond the galactic rim. The devourers were returning, drawn by humanity's awakening void-touched abilities like sharks sensing blood in the water. Admiral Patricia Stone coordinated the evacuation of outer colonies as the approaching dark matter storms made long-range sensors malfunction and communications unreliable. The storms moved faster than light by warping space-time around them and would reach Earth within days. Whatever decision humanity made about their future would have to be implemented before the devourers arrived. The architects revealed that the approaching entities were not separate species, but the collective consciousness of every civilization that had chosen the consumption path. They existed now as pure hunger that could never be satisfied, feeding on the reality of entire galaxies before moving on to find new sources of existence to devour. The storms were just the leading edge of an invasion that would strip the galaxy down to empty space. Dr. Lewis presented her findings to a joint session of world leaders while Kate Sullivan lay unconscious in a medical facility, her mind still, processing equations that described the mathematics of reality itself. The bridge protocol offered humanity a chance to survive with their essential nature intact, but it required a level of unity and cooperation that the species had never achieved. In its entire history, President Mitchell made the announcement that would define humanity's future. In 24 hours, every human being would participate in a global meditation designed to activate the bridge protocol. Those who chose individual power over collective connection would doom their entire species to becoming another devourer dynasty. Those who chose unity would transform humanity into something new that could offer redemption even to the consumed civilizations approaching from the cosmic void. The choice was no longer between transcendence and destruction, but between unity and division. Captain Murphy led the final preparations from the galactic core while monitoring stations tracked the approaching darkness. Dr. Lewis worked with Veiltheran scientists to create the resonance network that would link every human consciousness during the critical moment of decision. As the countdown began, engineer Tony Williams and teacher Mary Johnson found themselves among millions of humans whose void-touched abilities were growing stronger with each passing hour. The approaching devourers were triggering responses in human DNA that accelerated their evolution toward Phase 3, where individual control over reality would become absolute. The bridge protocol had to be activated before that point, or humanity would fragment into competing reality shapers who would tear the universe apart, fighting each other for dominance. The Devourer fleet emerged from the cosmic void like a cancer spreading across the edge of space, consuming starlight and leaving absolute darkness in its wake. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UNS Horizon as reality itself began unraveling around the approaching entities. These were not ships in any conventional sense, but living wounds in space-time that moved by devouring the distance between themselves and their targets. Dr. Lisa Carter monitored the readings from her scientific station as the devourers approached, and what she discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about the enemy. The entities were not malevolent invaders, but the traumatized remnants of civilizations that had faced the same choice humanity now confronted. They had chosen consumption over connection and become trapped in an eternal hunger that could never be satisfied no matter how much they devoured. Commander Ryan Blake coordinated the defense preparations while trying to comprehend weapons that operated by erasing the concept of existence from targeted areas. The Devourer weapons didn't destroy matter, they simply removed it from reality entirely, leaving behind regions where physics ceased to function. Human and Veil Theran ships vanished not in explosions, but in spreading zones of absolute nothingness that consumed everything they touched. On Earth, President Laura Mitchell activated the Global Communication Network to guide humanity through the bridge protocol as the Devourer fleet tore through the outer solar system. Every human being from the colonies of Mars to the research stations orbiting Jupiter participated in the largest collective meditation in the species' history. The success or failure of this moment would determine not just humanity's survival, but the fate of every conscious being in the galaxy. Dr. Sandra Lewis monitored the quantum resonance readings from her laboratory as 8 billion human minds attempted to link their consciousness across space-time. The process required each individual to simultaneously maintain their personal identity while opening their thoughts to direct connection with every other human. Engineer Kate Sullivan had recovered enough to serve as a focal point for the network, using her dark matter communion experience to guide the species through their transformation. The first phase of the bridge protocol activated as human void touched, abilities synchronized across the entire species. Teacher Mary Johnson felt her consciousness expand beyond her physical body to touch the minds of students she had taught decades ago on distant worlds. Engineer Tony Williams discovered that his reality manipulation powers were no longer individual abilities, but part of a collective network that could reshape existence through unified intention rather than personal desire. War Chief Zethtel and Admiral Patricia Stone found themselves fighting side by side as former enemies united against a threat that transcended species loyalty. The Veil Theran military commander watched in amazement as human void-touched abilities began operating on a scale that dwarfed anything previous civilizations had achieved. But instead of using their power for domination, humanity was offering it as a gift to heal the damaged reality around them. The breakthrough came when the Human Consciousness Network made contact with the approaching devourers and discovered the truth about what they had become. These entities had once been teachers, scientists, artists, and explorers from dozens of different species who had chosen individual power over collective harmony. They existed now as fragments of traumatized consciousness, trapped in bodies made of living void that could never find peace or satisfaction. Engineer Bob Taylor, who had gained the ability to manipulate time during the New Eden experiments, served as one of the communication nodes between humanity and the devourers. Through the Bridge Protocol network, he transmitted not weapons or threats, but memories of love, compassion, and simple joy. The human collective consciousness reached out to the consumed civilizations, offering them something they had not experienced in millions of years: the possibility of redemption. The devourer entities paused in their assault as human memories flooded through their consciousness networks. They experienced the sensation of a mother holding her child for the first time. They felt the satisfaction of building something beautiful that would outlast their own lifetime. They remembered what it was like to choose helping others over, helping themselves, and the peace that came from being part of something larger than individual ambition. Dr. Lisa Carter realized that the Bridge Protocol was accomplishing something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of fighting the devourers or transcending beyond their reach, humanity was offering to heal them by sharing the connections they had chosen to abandon. The human consciousness network became a living bridge between the consumed entities and the reality they had forgotten how to be part of. Captain Rachel Murphy transmitted the critical discovery from the Galactic Core Research Station. The dark matter storms were not weapons, but expressions of grief from civilizations that had lost the ability to create or nurture anything. The devourers consumed reality not because they were evil, but because consumption was the only interaction they remembered how to have with existence. They had forgotten how to build, protect, or love, and feeding was their only remaining response to encountering other forms of life. The transformation began slowly as individual devourer entities accepted the Bridge Protocol connections offered by humanity. The void-touched network allowed the consumed consciousnesses to experience physical sensation and emotional connection without having to devour them. For the first time in millions of years, the devourers could interact with reality without destroying it. Colonist Amy Fisher watched from New Eden as the dark matter storms began to change from instruments of consumption into tools of restoration. The devourer entities were using their reality manipulation abilities to repair the damage they had caused across the galaxy. Stars that had been consumed were restored to existence. Planets that had been erased from space-time reappeared with their original inhabitants alive and unharmed. The process accelerated as more devourers joined the Bridge Protocol network and shared their power with humanity's collective consciousness. The combined abilities of dozens of void-touched species working in harmony could accomplish miracles that no individual civilization had ever imagined. Dead galaxies were restored to life. Consumed realities were pulled back from the void. The scars left by millions of years of cosmic warfare began to heal. Engineer Kate Sullivan emerged from her meditative trance to find that humanity had successfully completed their transformation into something entirely new. They remained physically human, but their consciousness existed simultaneously in normal space-time and the dark matter networks that connected all realities. They had become living bridges between existence and void, capable of healing damage that had been thought permanent. The architects appeared in Earth's skies not as judges come to pass sentence, but as ancient beings seeking to understand how humanity had accomplished the impossible. The crystalline entities acknowledged that the Bridge Protocol represented a fourth path of void-touched evolution that they had never conceived. Instead of choosing between transcendence and consumption, humanity had created a third option that allowed for healing and redemption. President Mitchell addressed the transformed galaxy from the United Nations headquarters in New York as representatives of dozens of species arrived to witness humanity's new role as cosmic healers. The devourers that had once threatened all existence now worked alongside their former victims to restore what had been lost. The consumed civilizations were being given second chances to choose connection over domination. The story concluded with humanity taking their place as the galaxy's newest guardians, but in a way that no previous species had imagined. They became the darkness that even stars could not hide, not because they consumed light, but because they carried within themselves the memories and hopes of every civilization that had chosen power over unity. They were living proof that even the most traumatized consciousness could find healing through connection, and that redemption was possible for anyone willing to choose love over fear. In the end, humanity had not transcended their physical nature, or consumed everything around them, but had instead transformed the very concept of what void-touched evolution could become. They remained recognizably human, while serving as bridges between realities, offering hope to species that had thought their mistakes were permanent. The universe itself had been changed by their choice to heal rather than hurt, and the galaxy entered a new age where even the darkest entities could find their way back to the light.